Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Kai. I am the head instructor for Ludus Ferocia Historical Combat in Norfolk, and I have been a Kenjutsu instructor and teacher for more than half of my life. And I wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit about my experiences as a Kenjutsu practitioner and how that's changed so much over the years, and how steel sparring katanas have changed the way that I view Kenjutsu. Now, I started training in Kenjutsu when I was 14 years old, and I was lucky enough to find an instructor to rank me when I was about 19. I studied Kenjutsu under him for over 10 years, and I got ranked through him. And it was very good to legitimize my skills through a system like that. But the majority of what I learned there was kata, customs, and very light sparring. Now, because I was also practicing other very combative disciplines, such as MMA, boxing, wrestling, and knife disciplines, I had a hunger to pressure test my skills, but because of the equipment limitations we had in that Kenjutsu school, we never really got to spar a whole lot. And it was very frustrating for me as a early 20s practitioner who wanted to fight all the time. That isn't to say that I'm not grateful for learning the customs and all of the traditions that come with learning a Japanese martial art, which adds to the legitimacy of what we do now. But I found later in life that there were many other Kenjutsu practitioners who felt this same frustration that I felt. But let me tell you guys, the disparity of wanting to spar and feeling like I'm not able to test my techniques or my personal skill out was extremely frustrating. I became so dissatisfied with many of the schools that were around my area that I decided to start my own ryu, which I knew was going to be a potentially contentious and controversial decision, but I'm really happy I did, because as I construct my own style and still base it on historical fighting systems, I'm able to implement the need for sparring way more than the other systems that I trained in. There were many reasons why sparring was not allowed at many of the dojos that I visited, and the main one was, of course, safety. Historical European martial arts, or HEMA, has changed a lot of how we view safety with steel swords. As you guys know, HEMA has become a lot more popular in the last 5 to 10 years, and steel swords are what people fight with. Now, I do understand that the community is still evolving and safety equipment and procedures are still being developed. We're still in the creative age of historical European martial arts, but Japanese sword fighting is finally catching up. There are many HEMA sword companies and even dedicated Japanese sword art companies that are now producing very well-made sparring katanas made out of steel. Our academy is lucky enough that we have 3 different types. We have the Siggy XL, we use the Purple Heart Armory VB katanas, and we have these swords which are made by Akato Armory, and these are our favorite. One of the reasons why I feel like a tool like this is so useful for the Japanese practitioner is it replaces so many other tools you need to practice Japanese sword fighting. So if you think about it, when you get into Iaido, or when you get into Kendo, or when you get into Kenjutsu, you typically are going to have a multitude of different types of sword trainers. You have what is called an Iaito, which is a metal training blade. It's like an aluminum mixture. If you're in the West, you can get a carbon steel version of that. It's just a dull katana, but you're not going to be able to spar with it, because traditionally made katanas are not built to withstand constant damage, especially to the edge. But if you've ever used an Iaito like that, they're extremely lightweight. They're not realistic in weight at all. They're way too light. They're lighter than the Bokuto that you would use, your wooden swords. And obviously, if you hit anything with it, it's going to break. You would then have your Shinken, which is your cutting blade, right? This is not going to replace your Shinken for any kind of tameshigiri practice. But along with your Iaito, you're also going to have your sparring implements, and those are going to be typically your Shinai or your Boken. And your Shinai is your bamboo sword, and the Boken, of course, is the wooden version of a katana. It has the same curvature and the same shape. There are limitations to both. Bokuto, or Boken as they're called here in the West, they are not really safe for sparring. It's kind of like swinging around a light baseball bat with a tip on it. And how do I know that? A lot of injuries in my past from sparring with Boken with very dubious protection. Injuries, and even worse, is very plausible with swinging around something like a boken. Now, shinai, or the bamboo swords that are typically used in kendo, they're also used in kenjutsu traditionally. They're very safe, but you also still need to wear protection. So the bogu armor that kendo practitioners typically wear is what I saw during my time in dojos. Steel and wood just do not behave the same, and I can tell you that from firsthand experience. Having used boken and shinai pretty much my whole life, and then moving on to something like this, it actually made a lot of our traditional kata make a lot more sense, because those katas were built around the use of steel swords. The shape of a steel sword, the weight, the balance, and the way that deflection and blocking feel is just so different from wood, and especially flexible wood like bamboo. A good example of this is in the shape of the blade. It's a lot thinner than a round bamboo sword, which, I mean, it's going to be about that thick. The amount of space that can displace is pretty substantial, and if you don't believe me, get into a sparring match and you tell me. The curvature of the katana itself aids to very specific techniques, and you're not going to get it from a straight blade. And lastly, being able to have a scabbard is extremely important, and having that in a blade that is also simultaneously my sparring blade and my kata, if you want to call it your kata blade, your iaito, is just great. I don't have to spend money on two swords. Every single one of our Kenjutsu students practices with steel, and I'm just really happy that tools like this now exist, and the desire for Kenjutsu students to pressure test what they've learned over the years is becoming more prevalent. Now, when I started down this path of going steel versus wood and tradition versus new style, the journey and the conversations I've had with more traditionalists have been very interesting, because I am the head of a new style that I've created. So my legitimacy is oftentimes put into question because my art didn't come from something that was 400, 500, 600 years old. I imagine that the beginning of most of these practitioners' journeys started with them wanting to understand the use of the katana, to be able to fight with it. But as time goes on, the desire to preserve your art becomes the primary focus. And there isn't anything wrong with that. If you are practicing a koryu, or like an old art, something that is hundreds of years old, there is honor in wanting to preserve that and do it the way that it's been done for that amount of time. But practicing a new Kenjutsu system gives you the freedom to experiment and to see if certain kata work in sparring, to maybe innovate and try something new. And to be fair, this is what samurai did. We look at disciplines like Yagyushin Kage-ryu, which I did study for a time. We see that that system changed from its original start because the new system heads would discover that there was something missing, that there was something that needed to be changed within the system to keep up with modern demands. Because the need for the sword has already passed, we are constantly in a state of trying to preserve these beautiful old arts, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you are someone like me who wants to fight and wants to understand what is best and what works for you, these environments are not going to be conducive to you figuring that out. They're going to frustrate you like they frustrated me. When I first started mentioning using swords like this to my more traditional practitioner friends, there was a lot of fight back. There was a mention of it being unsafe, there was mention of it being just not right, that they felt disconnected from the weapon. But essentially, I told them that they were stick fighters. Now, it was in tongue-in-cheek because we're all friends and we all practice together. But when you think about it, wooden swords just don't behave like steel swords. They don't. If you've ever cut with a katana, if you've ever done tamashigiri or even just backyard cutting, you should know that a bokuto and a shinken, a sharp blade, they don't behave the same. It's time for those who want to understand practical skills with a katana to move, oh my God, geez, into the exciting world of using steel. I think that there's still a lot of beauty in tradition, and I don't think that this aspect of Kenjutsu should overtake the preservation of traditional arts. But I think the two can live in harmony. You can definitely practice old martial arts, but you can also set aside time to truly understand how your art worked in fighting. And you can't do that as well with wooden weapons. I think that steel is definitely the way to go, and the era to do that is now. I honestly didn't know why I wanted to make this video. It was just something that's been on my mind for a really long time, and I would love to start a discussion with other practitioners, HEMA and Kenjutsu practitioners, to talk about this kind of going away from wood and moving into steel when the technology is available for you to do this now. Protective gear has come such a long way, and you can safely fight with these weapons, and they're so enjoyable. They're so fun. I should be able to put it to you like this. In the over 20 years I've been practicing Kenjutsu, it is only in the last 3 that I have felt like I am one with the art, that I am actually learning what I set out to learn when I was 14 years old. And if we boil it down, it's how do I fight with a katana? It wasn't, I want to uphold this tradition, I want to be a part of this tradition. It was a simple instinctive feeling to want to fight with a katana and learn how a katana was actually used. As I go down this path of developing my own ryu and getting more students who like the sparring aspect of our school, I try to balance this out with maintaining the customs and traditions of Japanese sword fighting. I do think you can get to the opposite side of the spectrum where it no longer becomes a Japanese martial art, but you are fighting with a Japanese shaped weapon, and that's it. So in no way am I saying that I wish to throw away the techniques that have been passed down to me and the techniques that worked hundreds of years ago. I do think that reflection on where we all started as practitioners to where this could be, because we don't see a lot of Kenjutsu tournaments where they're using steel. It's something I seek to change in the near future. I have a lot of plans in the works to have an exclusive Japanese sword fighting tournament that includes draw cutting, bato jutsu, and also dueling, and maybe even skirmishing, potentially even indoor skirmishing with like walls, things that where you have to use a wakizashi or a tanto. Just things that have been in my head for years that now that I have this building and now that we have these tools, is definitely a possibility where we can explore how a samurai may have fought in these different environments. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I have to get over a lot of my own doubts because I am treading in a lot of controversial water, I would say, because people really like keeping things the way that things have been. And I seek to shake the water a little bit. But I think it's going to be really exciting. And if you guys find something like this interesting, especially if you're a Kenjutsu practitioner, or maybe you're somebody who wants to get into Kenjutsu, maybe you're somebody who went to HEMA because you wanted to see more sparring. And I only say that because I've had a lot of people in our own school tell me that from our HEMA side, that they have never been interested in Japanese martial arts because the sparring is limited. It's all kata, it's all customs, and people want a little more action. But if it's something that you're interested in, if this piques your interest, if it's something that maybe you felt yourself, please say so in the comments. If you are someone who vehemently disagrees with this, if you believe that this is an affront to your art, or tell me also. I want to know. I really want to understand the nerve of this issue, because it's been a pretty loud nerve for a long time, and I just want to understand the community a little bit better. I hope you guys enjoyed this little talk, and I would love to have more in the future, so let me know if there's any other topics on Kenjutsu that you would love for me to talk about. But other than that, I have nothing else for you guys. Bye.